So you want to build a luxury pergola in 2024. The reason why I say that is because you're going to see multiple different clips during this video and me talking from a year prior, going over the install video. There have been changes from last year to this year because we like to always make our product better. So anytime we have the opportunity to make something better, we do it. In the old install video, you will have seen that you used to add beam caps with caulk and an external cap that were separate from one another. You'll see that here on this B-roll. Now it is a single unit, but it's a nice part because you don't have to caulk something on. If you need to remove it for any reason, or if you ever take the unit down to move it to a new house, you can always do that, and this makes it a lot easier to do that. There are a few other things that have changed also. I'll call them out as we go on or as we move forward. So if you see me interject, I'm gonna try and do a combination of, you'll see us building an old 12 by 20 unit, which had a satin colored frame. So it was a bronze unit with stone louvers, and it was all satin. We have moved recently into textured units. So all the frame materials are a textured powder coat. We're gonna be building this time an 8 by 12, so it shows you a little bit of variance in terms of size. This does have custom posts. So the height to the ceiling here is 119 inches, just shy of 10 feet. The unit itself is a 10.2 height overall. When you build the unit with our standard 108-inch posts, that's what I would recommend for everyone. But if you do need custom posts, we do that. So these are gonna be 8.5 foot posts. So if you, for whatever reason, somehow notice that the posts are slightly shorter, that is what you're seeing. I doubt you'll be able to see it through the camera, but that is what's going on. So we're gonna go ahead and start building it. One thing I do note here is you'll see these post bases here are a regular stainless steel. I'll show you a close up, but the stainless steel posts, we only powder coated them before because the flange was visible and people didn't like seeing that. Every unit is now going to be shipping with a base collar, which you'll see right here. This base collar we will assemble after the unit is built. We did this new collar for two reasons. One, it's more decorative, so you don't see the actual fasteners or the anchors into the concrete. And two, it allows you to be able to add them after the fact. Our old base trim you had to add while you were building it. This one you can add after, or if it breaks for any reason, it's more easily replaceable. So let's rewind and let's talk through exactly how it arrives and what you're going to be receiving, so that way you can see what you're going to have. We're gonna start first in boxes. This is basically how you're gonna receive the actual pergola itself. It's gonna be in these long boxes mainly, because everything's a really long extrusion, up to this one right here is actually a 20-foot long box. First, when you're gonna assemble a unit like this, let's go through exactly what you should already have before you receive it in order to make sure you can assemble it. First, you need a rotary hammer. You need a 3/8 rotary hammer bit. All your safety protection, so that's gonna be work gloves, safety glasses, and hearing protection. Painter's tape, a 25-foot measuring tape, utility knife, screwdriver, wire strippers, channel lock pliers, an impact driver, usually cordless is what we'd recommend, a 9/16 socket, a socket adapter for your impact driver, paper towels, a caulk gun, a 72-inch level to make sure everything is plumb, and then you need we recommend two 8-foot ladders. Some optional things you can use for the anchors themselves would be a blower. This is a cordless blower, or a shop vacuum, both of which would help make sure that the hole is clear before you run the anchor. Here we've got all the boxes for the small parts as well as the post bases. So each of these boxes here that are 20 inches tall, that's what you're gonna unbox typically first. These have all of those post bases in them. They're also noted saying that they're post base and hardware. So you're gonna start with these, and then this is your hardware and electrical box, and that's gonna have all of your other hardware, your screws, that sort of thing. So it unboxes like this. You're gonna first look to make sure that you can see as you unload it that you have all of the boxes. So if it says number 9 of 20, you need to have 20 boxes, make sure you have 20. They're also all going to have a color that matches what is listed on the bill of lading, or BOL. So you check your color, make sure it matches here, make sure your name is correct, the color is correct, the size, and you get all of the number of boxes that you received, up to 20 boxes. Next, what we're gonna do is just unbox everything and then show you laid out exactly what you're gonna receive in the kit. This is everything you're gonna use to put the unit together, other than obviously the long assembly pieces like the posts and beams and gutters. So the gutters themselves, you will have these gutter connectors. There will come 4 of them. They'll be drilled out and labeled for electrical and drainage, and then 2 of them will say standard. Those are just your normal corners that are not your electrical and drainage corners. This part right here is actually your motor connect. This we will use at the very end to connect onto your link bar that then connects to your motor to make it actually operational. These are your tubes of caulk. This is to seal the unit itself. Right here, this is your touch-up paint. We will either send small cans like this as a spray paint. Make sure you shake them up. If you don't shake them up, the sheen won't be perfect. So make sure you shake them for a good 10 minutes before you use them. Or you will get a touch-up pen, which you basically just use like a pen. Over here, we have an electrical box. This is housing all of the electric you need. You have a 9-foot 110 volt cord that comes out this side that plugs into a standard outlet. And on this side, you have your landscape wire that actually connects to your motor, which will show you how that works. There's 50 feet of line here, so you should have plenty for whatever you need to do, whether you want to trench this in your yard or whatnot. Inside this box here, you have your remote. And that's really the only thing you need inside of there, other than there's also brackets that you can use if you want to mount this to a wall. That's also in there. Here you have your shims. You'll use these if you need to shim up the post bases to get your post plumb. So there's 2 packs of composite shims in here. This box right here is your waterproof connection box. You'll use this to actually attach the motor to the landscape line as a terminal basically for your landscape line to your motor. Here you have your motor itself. Then over here on this side you have your caps and your sleeves. Those are decorative to hide the connection of each beam to the next beam. On the far end you have a big bag of end caps. Those get mounted onto every single louver to drop into the slots themselves in order to let the thing actually rotate. Also on this side, you have your 6.5-inch insert. These are used to connect your posts to your gutter connectors to your beam-to-beam connectors, and I'll show you how that assembles a little later. And then you have a pack of your beam-to-beam connectors, which obviously attach a beam to a beam. Other than that, you have small parts here. So bag A is going to be all your bits that we provide to run all the screws that we give you. Bag B is your 1-inch number 12s. Those will be used to attach your beam-to-beam connector to your 6.5-inch insert. C will be used to attach your gutter connector to the 6.5-inch insert. D's will be used as your number 10 screws. Those will be for all of the non-structural parts, which we'll show you where that goes. And bag L is used for all your structural connections. So those are your number 14 screws. They'll be used for all the post connections and beam connections. Bag M is your push nuts. Those will be used to attach your louvers to the link bar. Please make sure when you attach these push nuts that your link bar is perfect, because these will not come off unless you cut them off. So make sure you get that correct. Bag P is your anchors to attach your post base down to the concrete itself. Bag R attaches your end caps to your louvers as well as your caps to the top of the beam-to-beam connector. And bag S is your motor assembly. So all the parts you need to attach the motor and get that functional on the unit, as well as the 2 grommets you'll use to run the wire. So quick interruption, if you see me in here, this is the only place that doesn't make noise these days, and we already finished building the unit, so I wanted to add a few points. First off, please note if you have a Magnum or an Ultra pergola, then the post base sizing will be slightly different. If you have a Magnum, your base collar won't be the same, so you can skip the base collar portion there. We have a separate video for the Magnum base collars. And then in terms of your anchor sizes for a Magnum or an Ultra, you have different anchors as well. So you'll actually, instead of using a 9/16 socket like you do for the standard Pro, for the Ultra, you'll have to use a 5/16 socket for your anchors. And for the Magnum, you'll have to use 1 inch and 1/8 socket to actually run your anchors. You also have a different anchor in terms of the drill. So your depth needs to be 6 inches on the drill bit. You can again use the anchor as actually a measuring device on the hammer drill bit itself. And your hammer drill bit, instead of a 3/8 is going to be a 5/8. So Ultra 5/8 hammer drill bit needs to be at least a 6-inch embedment. For the Magnum, you're talking about an 8.5-inch anchor that's 3/4. So you need a 3/4 hammer drill bit that's at least 8 to 8.5 inches in depth. And that gives you enough to actually run the anchor all the way down. These are ginormous anchors, but that's something to note if you're looking at building this. Make sure you have the correct sockets and the correct hammer drill bits for the Magnum and the Ultra units. Also, quick note, if you have a Super Pergola, you're not going to be using the same sort of gutter connection for the middle post. So please go look at our Super Pergola video to make sure that you're doing the correct connection on the 6.5-inch insert for the middle post. It just spans 2 beams, so it's slightly offset on the gutters. Again, check out that video. You'll see exactly what I'm talking about. Your drainage and your electrical should be the same, but the middle ones, the standard ones, will be different. So watch that video before you set your frame. So the first thing we're going to do, we've already unboxed all the small parts. We've unboxed the posts. They're on the far end there. We're going to sleeve all the posts onto the post bases, ensuring that the drainage slot lines up with the drainage slot in the post base, and the electrical hole lines up with the slot in the post base in order to get those in the right spot. We're going to put our electrical post actually here on this near corner, and our drainage is going to go on this near corner as well. So the drainage will face out towards the camera, and the electrical will face out towards the camera so you can see what we're doing. Those are interchangeable. You can turn them in any direction or have them face wherever you want or put them anywhere you want on the unit. So all that you can decide when you actually receive the unit. So we're going to start with that and we'll come back. As a note, we recommend to slide the beams and gutters out, as well as the louvers and posts. Everything to slide out of the box rather than cutting the box open, because if you start cutting into it, you could very easily cut the beam itself or cut the post, and you don't want to do that. All of these are obviously going to face your yard or your neighbor, and so you don't want to have a big scratch down the side of your beam. So slide everything out of the boxes. One thing we recommend when you're laying out the unit, try and measure out the space and know where everything's going to be. So ours is a 12 by 20 unit. It's the largest kit that we offer. And the biggest thing to note there is the post bases themselves, the flanges are actually 1.5 inches beyond that. So technically, when we laid this out, we made sure that from one edge of the outside of that post base to the other edge on the outside of that post base was 20 feet 3 inches. So that way we knew exactly where those should go. And then we squared everything and made sure everything was in the right area as we laid it out. So just make sure you know where you're going to put it and lay it out. Generally, try and get it square before you start doing this. You can change it after as you start to assemble the unit, but it's something that does help. After you've slid the posts down onto the post bases, you want to make sure you anchor them off to the post bases. In the back there, we're putting screws, one screw in each side. Don't fully tighten it down. Put one screw partially in on each side, and you'll see that here in this video of us doing that, before you tighten them down as you're putting the screws in the bottom, because the post base itself is slightly narrower than the inside dimension of the post. If you over tighten one side, you're then going to be kicked one way, which means on the next side, the one to the right of it or adjacent to it, or the left I suppose, is now going to be slightly off from the pre-drilled holes, and stainless is not easy to drill through. So please slightly put in the screws on each side, make sure everything's aligned, and then finish the screws off. You should put in on all those small pilot holes a number 14 screw that comes from bag L, and make sure you put that in using the impact driver that you already have, as well as the 3/8 bit that comes out of bag A. As you've probably already figured out, the two screws that are hitting the cavity in the post base are dummy screws. They're not going to anchor in. Doesn't change the structural load whatsoever. So they're just there for aesthetics, so don't worry about them. Before you start going too far, make sure that you run the wire, your landscape wire, up your electrical post. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add the grommet. There are 2 black grommets that come in bag S. You're going to put one of those grommets into the post down there at the bottom, and then you're going to feed the wire into the post, lean it over, and then use a tape measure to actually fish the wire through. Once you pull it through, then you'll tape it off to the top of the post. We're going to go through that now. One thing to note, when you pull out the wire through the post, we like to double the wire back on the post. These posts are standard 9-foot height. If you double it back on the post and go a little beyond, then you can make sure that you have at least 10 feet on a 20-foot unit to make sure you can make it all the way to the motor. So we usually recommend to make sure you have 10 feet coming out through one side to make sure you have enough to make it to the motor. You can always take it back through if you have too much later, but that way you know you have enough in the actual unit itself. One of the other things down at the grommet, you may have difficulty getting the grommet in because it's a tight fit. So using one of the bits that we gave you can help to actually wedge it in there and then fill out that hole to make sure the hole is open enough for the wire itself. So the next thing to do after all these posts have had all the screws put in them is to assemble your connectors. You have 3 versions of these 6.5-inch inserts. One is drilled out for drainage. One is a standard one that looks like this. It doesn't have any holes in it, extra holes in it, and one has an electrical hole drilled in it right there. For the standard connectors, it doesn't really matter your orientation, other than the fact that you always make sure that the gutter connector is facing out like this. So you want to make sure that as you slide this connector in, you line up on these last 4 holes here on this corner. So that as you line it up, it looks something like that. So all your standard connectors will just anchor together like that. You'll use bag C to actually attach those screws down. The C ones are shorter than the B ones. You'll attach 4 screws in on the standard connectors just like that. On the electrical connector, it's the same thing, except you're gonna line up both your electrical hole here as well as all of your holes for your screw. So you wanna make sure that both of those holes line up, and then you attach those 4 screws in right there. That way you have both your electrical hole and your holes into this. Same thing, bag C is gonna attach those 4 screws down into the connector. And to be repetitive, your drainage connector is going to do essentially the exact same thing. You're going to line up your drainage connector, your drainage hole with your drainage connector, and then make sure that everything lines, and then put your 4 C screws also in there. Next, you need to attach your beam-to-beam connectors to your new assembly. So you want to take this. There's no specific beam-to-beam connector for different gutter or drainage connectors. So all of them look the exact same. They have 2 larger holes and 2 smaller holes. So there's no difference. The only thing you need to make sure is that the 2 larger holes are going to go to the outside of the connector. So that side and that side. So your angled fin needs to be facing me. Your 2 holes should be facing in like this. And then if you look at it the other way, you'll see the fin is facing out and these 2 holes are facing. And then you're going to run B screws through the bottom of the connector up into those 4 bosses in the actual extrusion itself. So 4 B screws are going to go into each of these, make sure these holes are facing out. Here right now we've already laid out the unit. I highly recommend you lay out the unit, meaning I know that this post here is going to be a standard, this here is a standard, that's my electric, and that's my drainage. And then you orient the beams. The way you orient yourself is D-wall. If D-wall is this back wall right here, then A would be the wall to the side, B is the wall in front, and C is the wall to my left. So that's how we orient them. Technically, A and C and B and D are interchangeable, but that's how we would orient them to make sure that you know what we're talking about in terms of layout. Together, the 6.5 inch insert to the beam-to-beam connector, you need to make sure that I would put the gutter on as well. You set them exactly how I talk about orienting them in the prior clip. Set them in front of the post bases. Make sure you know where they're going to go, and then label them with the wall they're attaching to. For example, this back wall right here, we're gonna call our D wall. This wall right here would then be our A, that's B, and that's C. So this one right here is joining D and A. So I would write a D on the side that faces D wall and an A on the side that faces, if you can read that, a D on the side that faces D wall and an A on the side that faces A wall. The reason why that's important is because we assemble the unit slightly differently, and you want to make sure that when you take this gutter connector back off, which is what I'll have you do, and attach this beam-to-beam connector into the wall, that you're doing the correct one, because you're going to put screws through it and throw it up. You want to make sure you're using the correct connector into the correct wall. So D wall, I'll label them all, and then I'll show you us attaching them to our B and D walls. You will pre-attach the beam-to-beam connectors into each wall, then drop them into the posts, and then raise up the A and C walls after the B and D walls are set. No, we're only going to put 1 anchor in one of the posts. That's to keep the whole unit from not falling over. But because you're only putting 1 anchor in, if you end up putting it to where you have it twisted the wrong way, you can always twist it back when the whole unit is built. So just put 1 anchor in 1 post. Please be aware, when you put that anchor in, if it's in the wrong spot, you will have to take the anchor back out and you'll have a nice hole in your concrete. So please make sure you're in the right area for that 1 post, at least to start. All the anchors you're gonna need are gonna be right here. They're in bag P. One trick you can use is you can use the anchor itself, place the anchor on the actual bit itself so that you basically have it to where the flange is at the top of the bit itself. And then you can see your actual depth, go down another 1/2 inch, and then put some painter's tape that you have on the bit so that you can sight exactly how deep you are as you anchor it down. So that is a really helpful way to make sure that you get enough depth on your rotary hammer bit while you're driving the anchors. To actually run it, you're going to use your rotary hammer and the 3/8 rotary bit, and then you're also going to use your impact driver with the socket adapter and the 9/16 socket to anchor these down, so that way you run this drive it down into the ground using the impact driver. Now that your post is anchored, your wires run, all the other posts are sleeved and the screws are in it, you're gonna actually set each of these connectors in the posts themselves. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we took each gutter connector, labeled it with the gutter attached, and then we're going to attach these to B and D wall, matching the letter obviously with the wall, attaching through beam connector itself into the wall. Make sure when you attach these beam to beam connectors, I don't know if I noted it, but make sure you keep these miters up. You'll see that it's mitered on both sides. It also has a sticker on it that says this side up. So make sure that side is up. That is what allows this beam cap to actually sit down flush, because one of the internal corners is rounded. So we want to make sure that you keep the miters on the top so that this sits flush on the top. So the steps are to make sure that you place that beam to beam connector, is what I call it, that facing in, make sure that the letter's obviously facing the unit. The 6.5 inch insert is going to line up with the gutter. So the overhang is going to match the overhang with the gutter, which you can see as we do it here. So that is the orientation of how those 6.5 inch inserts should be facing the gutter. Your gutters are on the inside of your unit. The 6.5 inch inserts face inside the B and D walls. So once you're going to attach that beam to beam connector through into the U-channel that's already built in the wall. So once you get that lined up, you'll turn it over. Your 6.5 inch insert and your gutter will match each other in their overhang. Then you're going to put 4 screws through those pre-cut out holes into the beam itself. So you'll see us obviously doing that. 4 screws through those pre-drilled holes into the beam. It ties everything together. One critical thing when you're attaching those 6.5 inch inserts into the beam, you'll see here, make sure that your reveal on that 6.5 inch insert to the edge of the beam is equidistant along the entire run, because that is incredibly important in making sure you get a nice flush edge here on this side. If you attach that 6.5 inch insert cocked where it meets the actual beam, then the post will twist as well, and you'll end up with something that looks good on one end and doesn't look good on the other. So make sure, as you can see here, that you're equidistant or even all the way across. The pre-drilled holes should get you there immediately, but if you accidentally strip some of those screws, or it doesn't tighten all the way, or you accidentally move it, or you attach those first, all those can throw you off. So make sure you have an even line all the way across. Now that we have those 6.5 inch inserts and the beam to beam connectors and all that built on both B and D wall, because we did both walls, now we're going to bring them in one at a time. First D in our case, because it's tucked here, and then B on the front side. We're going to drop them in to the posts. This is where having 3 people is incredibly helpful, because it makes sure that I can move the posts if they're not in the right spot. So 2 people will lift them up, we can move the posts, make sure they're in the right spot, drop it in, and then we put 4 screws in each side of the post. Yes, 4 of the screws on the other sides don't actually hit anything. They're dummy screws, but it allows you to turn the post. If you change your mind, you ever need to turn the post, the symmetrical screws on the top allow you to do that. So that's why it's oriented that way. So we're going to drop in this beam, put 4 screws on all sides, 4 screws on all sides on that side. Repeat the process here for B wall, do the same thing. Then we'll bring up A and C. When you slip this in, so after you slip the wall in, put the screws in the back side of the post, the one that's flush with the outside of the beam, put those screws in first. So that way, if you need to pull that 6.5 inch insert, because again, it's slightly smaller than the opening, backwards to make sure that beam flushes up better with the post, you might have a 1/16 showing, but to try to make sure you don't have anything more than that showing, you want to make sure you put those screws in on the beam side here first. If the flange isn't actually on that side and rather it's on this side, then put these screws in first. Again, you want that outside to look pretty. The slop that's dealt with on the inside doesn't matter, doesn't change anything structurally, but you're gonna want it to look as pretty as possible. So I would make sure you put in these outside 2 faces first before you do the inside 2 faces. Also, when you put the wall in that has the electrical gutter connector, the really small hole, you're gonna use your second grommet from bag S, place it in this hole right here, and then run the wire through this hole as you set the connector, and then tape it back to the post after you're done. So after you set your B and D walls, before you set your A and C walls, like we did here, you're gonna want to set your gutter connectors. So after you put B and Ds up, slide your gutter connectors in, put them back in place with those 4 screws. You can even put that one number 14 screw into your B or your D wall, and then bring A and C wall up. We've already anchored one post in that corner. We already put one anchor in it, just like we're supposed to. So we're gonna finish it off, put the rest of the anchors in that, and then we already squared it as well. So we're gonna start putting the anchors in all the other ones as well. So when you square it, you've got 2 options, depends on obstacles. One is gonna be to square everything high up with one post already plumbed. It's okay, it's fine, it just depends on obstacles. The easiest way to do it is actually your post base plate is a 10-inch base plate. The post is 7 inches. So essentially you take your measurement here, so this is an 8 by 12. You're gonna subtract 17 inches off each dimension. Do A squared plus B squared equals C squared with the inch or the foot measurement. So in this case, this is 6 feet 7 is my rise, and my run is gonna be 10 feet 7. Find your diagonal. In my case, that is 12 feet 5 and 9/16. Make sure that is the same measurement from the edge of the post base flange to the other edge of the post base flange for the other post. Make sure they're equal. So I'm 12, 5, and 9/16 diagonally to both post base flanges, or the leading point on the inside. Make sure all that's in the right spot, then anchor it down. So we have a level surface, so it's a little easier for us, and we don't have any obstacles, so we can do it that way. If you can't do it that way, you can also square everything up in the air. It's just a little harder because now you also have to worry about them each being plumb as you square it. So either way you want to do it, make sure it's plumb and square. Anchor it down. If you needed to use composite shims to try and get the post plumb, that's why we put the composite shims in there. Again, we have a level surface, so we won't have to worry about that. When you go to cut your composite shims off at the bottom, I would definitely use a 5-in-1. A 5-in-1 like this, that painters typically use, or a stiff putty knife, both of which provide a sharp enough edge, and when you hammer them, you're able to snap off what's left, the excess of the composite shim, relatively quickly. You can see us doing that here. So that way you don't have to worry about, cutting it a bunch with a utility knife. It makes it a lot quicker. So now you're ready to seal. Novaflex has specifications about their product. Please find those online using our paper manual. You'll find a QR code that brings you there that talks all about it. But we will go through the actual application of their sealant. You're going to use the same caulk gun you used for the corner cover. You're going to apply that caulk in an even pattern across several different legs. You're going to apply it up the corner of your beam to beam junction. You're going to apply it over the top of the gutter connector. You're going to apply it through the middle of the gutter connector. You're going to apply it around the base where the actual gutter lays in to the gutter connector, up the leg inside of that gutter connector that meets the gutter itself. The same thing on the other side in all those same spots. Once you've applied the caulk, then we want to make sure that you smooth it out. The best way to do this is, frankly, with your hand. Some people use a tool for it. If you're going to use your hand, please make sure that if you're using a dark frame color, you're going to know that it's going to stain your hand for a couple days after. So black and bronze will likely stain your hands for a few days. So when you actually spray it in there, you're going to use a light touch, just a little bit of pressure, and then run your finger along it to smooth it out. We smooth out the caulk to be essentially a ramp for the water as it moves into the gutter connector. The next place to seal is going to be the top of the gutter as it meets the beam. Same thing, you're going to use a light bead along the entire surface there, and then you're going to come back through with your finger to actually tool that bead in, smooth it out, and make it look nice and pretty. Paper towels are your friend. Make sure that you use paper towels to wipe off the caulk as you go. You don't want to have the same finger spread in caulk and then end up spreading it everywhere else on the unit and on yourself. So now that we've sealed, we're going to put our beam-to-beam covers on. Now the beam caps, this is part of the new design. Instead of using caulk and an extra cap like we used to do, it's a single piece. You can see me lifting it on, setting it on the corner, and then running 4 of your end cap screws, which are in bag R, through the top of that cap I call it a beam-to-beam cover, through that cap to hold it in place. That single extrusion, that single piece of aluminum allows you to have a more clean and easier to install part. It also allows you, if you ever need to remove it or you're taking down the unit, it's much easier to take it back off and replace it. So that's how the new beam cap installs. I would put those on now before we start getting into the louvers, just so you can finish off the frame. So even we can get very ahead of ourselves. We set all these louvers and forgot that it's easier to install the center beam with the louvers not in there. So before you anchor off the retainer strip, definitely recommend give yourself some headroom so you can see what's going on as you anchor in this center beam. Put the center beam in, then put the louvers in. You can put the center beam after the fact. I did it with Mr. Sean Smoot on the last center beam video. If you find that video on our YouTube, it's just not as easy as putting the center beam in now. So we're taking a couple louvers back out, putting the center beam in, and then putting the louvers back in the middle, then the retainer, then the link bar, then the crown. I have Anthony over here. He is taking all the louvers out of the bags and out of the boxes and setting them to the side. We're putting end caps on those and running the end cap screws. Each louver gets one end cap on each side and 2 screws inside those 2 screw bosses, which we'll show you. And then over here, Chris is taking the retainer strip, which is this L angle strip of extrusion that's sitting above what we would call the pivot strip, which is the piece of metal that has U's punched in it. He's taking that off and putting it on top of the beam, lining up with where the screws were that he took off, because each of these retainers is not identical. So you need to keep the retainers near where they're supposed to go, so that after we take each of these louvers and set them in their pivot strips, we can then drop the retainer back to its original position where it was, drive the screws back where the screws were. But first, we're gonna take those retainers, set them on top of the beams, and then we're gonna take these louvers, put end caps on them, and put them all in. At this point that you're putting them all in, one thing to note is to think about which way they're gonna close. Typically, the fin side, so it's the arc side that has the pile weather stripping, that is going to be your closing side. It's the louver, it's the direction the louvers are actually closing. And so the big thing to note there is typically people want them either closing to the north or to the east, some variation of them, or northeast. And that just gives them better range to have the louvers partially opened but still total shade underneath. So in this case, we're going to assume that this is our north end and all our louvers will be sitting with the fin that way. I would start on the closing side, the farthest closing side, so the louver that is furthest over on the pile weather strip side, and then move this way so that they can always interlock with one another. So we're going to start that way, starting on the closing side with how we set the louvers in. We'll also start on the closing side when we put our link bar in. While they're putting the louvers in, I will explain the new base collar. So this is one of the new things that we have. So the base collar is important because we had a lot of people that had the original base trim that we were sending. The problem with that was it came already assembled, welded together. And so you had to slide it on the post, then anchor them, like lift them up, anchor them, and then slide them back down. If you hadn't ever had any issues putting them, take them off or anything was a pain. So we wanted something that was still just as sturdy, but you could take off or you could put on after the fact. And we wanted to ship it as a standard part. Instead of charging more for base trim, we wanted to have a part that we could ship with every single pergola. So every pergola that we sell now has this base collar included. Now it doesn't come assembled, pre-made like this. The way they ship is in these miters. So they look like this. Essentially, the thing you're looking for here is this key. So you can see this channel up here at the top and the channel down here at the bottom. You're gonna put these keys in these channels. So basically, it'll end up looking like this. Now, the keys are gonna face in towards the L. So if this is the shape of an L, the keys are gonna follow the same. So they're gonna angle towards this. Because after you get this side in here, one of these will match it so that it makes a collar. So it will slide in like that. So that is essentially what we're looking for. What you're gonna do, you're gonna leave 2 the way they are with no keys in them. So set 2 to the side for each post. Then you're gonna put the keys, 4 keys in each of the other 2. So 2 get no keys, 2 get 4 keys. 2 per side, obviously. Top, bottom on this side, top, bottom on this side. The way you're gonna install these, I would put it on a piece of wood. Put it up on its end like that. Set your key. The easiest thing also is take an awl, set it in the channel, and just open the channel a little bit. That way, it makes the key a little easier to start. Quick interruption on the base collar. I talk about an awl and a nail set. We actually include a nail set now in bag A. So if you need a nail set to make these base collars, which you do, look in bag A, you'll find that there. Now the channel does have this leg here that is not supported, so that you can bend out a little bit there at the start in order to get the key in there. Obviously don't go too far, otherwise the key obviously won't have anything to grab onto, you won't be solid. So that allows you to get the key started so that it's at least pretty solid. Then you're gonna take a nail punch here, or nail set, whatever you want to call it. You're gonna set it right over that corner. You really want to make sure you're right over that corner, because if you accidentally go out here on this edge, you'll bend this leg. These are a cast aluminum, so if you try and bend it back, it's not very flexible. It can break on you. So make sure you stay on the edge here of the key. One thing to note, definitely be wearing gloves. When you're handling these are nice miters that we do on a saw. The good thing about a miter like this is because it's so nice, you end up with a really clean look once it's fully assembled. The downside is it's sharp. So make sure that you're wearing gloves when you do this for sure. So it'll look like that. Repeat this same process on the opposite side. Open up the channel first. Set the key, match the key for the L. Set the next key. Boom. So now you have one side with all 4 keys. You're gonna end up with, I'll show you real quick, you're gonna end up with 2 that look like this, that have keys, and 2 that have no keys. So I like to set the no keys to make my U, then make the last one. So we'll do that real quick. The way you attach these 2 together, the no key and the keyed one, again, I would get in the habit, if you want to do them all early on, you can, of opening up the channels on all sides of these. So that way it's easier. You don't have to do it this way, but it certainly makes it faster. You're gonna set this one matching the extrusions, set them face one another, set the keys in a little bit, and then here you're going to switch over to a different type of hammer. You're going to switch over to what we call dead blow, or should be called a dead blow, basically a rubber mallet. The reason why is because if I use this steel hammer, I will almost definitely mar the paint, so you want to make sure you don't do that. So make sure you stay even, a little bit on one side. Should close up, end up with a nice corner. So, repeat that process again on the other one that doesn't have keys in it to make a U. You can also obviously use the same dead blow for all of this. I prefer steel hammer, but either one works. again, match it. So this is your finished top. These legs down here, this is to cover over the post base flange itself. So you want to keep these up, match them. So you can see here, obviously, to make the same face, you want to match it like that. You're going to put the one that doesn't have keys down against the wood again. Boom. 3 sides. And again, we like these keys because even now with 3 sides, it's pretty rigid. So that's why we do these keys, no screws, no caulk, and you have a really solid part by the end. So this last one here, we're gonna do the keys. So we're gonna put 4 keys in this, 2 in each, again, like we did on the first one. And then we're gonna bring it over to the unit, slide this on, and then use the dead blow to knock this last face onto it. So, finished parts, U-shape, another trim with 4 keys in it. So we'll go put it on the other unit. All right, so the last one here, I'm gonna slide this U on. Apologies for the sound in advance. So slide this U on, you're gonna take your last part here with 2 keys. Again, as I said before, highly recommend bending out these legs here to get this started with an awl, so that way these will find where they need to go pretty quickly here, so you don't have to force anything. Use a clamp. And just alternate what side. Certain lesson days, you do get more even pressure. You have to expect everyone to take the time to use the clamp on this process. And then you're done. Your base color is installed. There's gonna be a little bit of room around the post and the base collar itself. That's for a multitude of reasons. One of which being obviously removability. But the other is just to make sure that there isn't anything in the way, that nothing causes any issues, and that the base collar looks pretty the same way every single time. If you don't like the gap, or you don't like the fact that you can still move it a little bit, you can always basically lift this up, put caulk on the inside leg here on the bottom. I'll show you on this piece. This piece right here is actually just shy of the post base. There's about, let's see, about a 1/4 inch between our standard post base and this leg right here. So you can put caulk right here and then lay it down so that it actually glues to the flange and post base if you don't like the extra room. And that'll keep it solid. You can always do that. Or you can leave it as it is, entirely up to you. So now that the louvers are set, before you put the link bar on, you're gonna actually wire up the motor using the waterproof box. You can see that here. The way you do that is you use this terminal junction. Before you tie the landscape to the waterproof box, make sure you open up the electrical box and take the remote out. You'll find it inside the electrical control box. And then close the electrical control box again, place it somewhere near your house, near the outlet that you plan on using. So to go over the electrical, we made it as simple as we possibly could. What we recommend is taking that landscape wire that is currently taped to your post, taking it off, bringing it down to the ground, and wiring on the ground. It's the simplest way to do it so that you're not doing it up in the air. You're gonna take our electrical junction box that shipped with the unit, and it shipped with an additional screwdriver as well. You're gonna take the top off of that electrical box. You're gonna feed the wire in from each side. One is gonna have the wire from the motor itself, and one will have the landscape wire that we shipped with the unit that you had taped to the post. Once you run each line through the electrical box, then you're going to cut the landscape line if you need to cut it. If you don't, you can use the existing line as it is, but you'll cut that line, you'll need to then split it in half. So when you use your knife, you're gonna wanna place it in the groove and actually cut that in half and then peel them away from one another. And then you use wire strippers to actually take off the sheathing off of the landscape wire if you've cut them. Then you'll take the gray terminal and you'll actually stab in each end of the motor connection and tie it with the small screwdriver that's shipped with the electrical package. Once you have that all tied together, then you're gonna stab in the ends of the landscape wire into that terminal and match them with the corresponding colors. Red should match with the landscape wire that has wording on it, and black should match with the landscape wire that has a groove that you can feel on the opposite side of the seam that once joined them. If when you fire the motor later and the up button corresponds different than what we go through, there's a way to switch it later, and we can show you how to do that in one of our troubleshooting videos. Once you have those terminals fastened down, then you can set that main gray terminal box down into the electrical box itself. There will be pegs that it actually aligns to that will hold that terminal in place. Then you're gonna pull the excess wire back through the ends of either side, and then you're going to tighten each end by screwing it down. That is sealing the actual box or that electrical connection. So make sure you tighten each of those ends down. You'll see that yellow gasket is sealing the wire down and actually keeping water from coming in. Then you're gonna take the cover, you're gonna place the cover back on top of the electrical connection box, and then you're going to put the screws back through it and tighten them down all the way to make sure you have a waterproof connection. Once that's all done, I want you to take your electrical box, bring it over to your nearest outlet, and plug in the excess wire into that outlet. Now you're operational. Your motor should be able to run, and then use the remote to extend the motor all the way. If your motor's not extending, we have troubleshooting videos. Please check our library of those to make sure that you have all the information that you need to make sure everything works correctly. But extend the motor all the way. When you press the down button on the remote, the motor should extend. If when you press down, the motor doesn't extend, but rather wants to retract, then swap the terminals, unplug it, and swap the terminals on the waterproof box that you just put together, and then plug it in and try it again. It should work correctly. Extend the motor all the way. Now that the waterproof junction box is assembled, put it in the gutter. Once you have that wired with the terminal junction, then you're gonna raise that waterproof box up in the air and the motor and slip it through the louvers, and then you're gonna set it on top of the louvers for the moment. Then you're gonna do your link bar, and then you're gonna put the motor in place. Now that it's on top of the louvers though, when you go to do the link bar, make sure that you route the motor on the outside of that link bar before you put on the link bar. Otherwise, you're gonna trap the wire on one side of the link bar and one side of the louvers versus the outside, which is what it needs to be on. So again, these are things you really need to make sure you do as you build it. So make sure when you take the link bar up there and you start fastening it on, that you keep the motor wire on the outside, on the beam side of the link bar before you fasten it on. Then once you put it on, then you can put the motor back on top of the louvers. Now, for actually putting the link bar on, this is something people make mistakes on all the time. You need to make sure that you put the link bar on starting on the closing side. So what you're gonna do, if you're looking at your unit, let's say the fin, again, if you remember from setting the louvers, the fin is on the closing side. So if I'm closing on the left side of this unit, because that's where the long fin is, you're gonna start on that side. When you look at the link bar, you're gonna have spacing there. One is gonna have a 4-inch spacing center to center. So from the center of the slot to the center of the hole is 4 inches. On the other side of that is gonna be 3 3/8. Make sure you use the 4-inch, start on the 4-inch side over here. Put the link bar on. What you need to know here is make sure you put the link bar on while the louvers are closed. If they're closed, you're gonna know you have backwards as you set it on. So make sure the slot lines up with one of those nubs coming out of the end cap, and the hole lines up with the other nub on the same louver. Now the holes go on the closing side of each louver. I have diagrams in each of those bags. You can see it in the video. The closing side, again, is the one with the fin. The push nut and the hole only go on that side of the end cap. The other side of the end cap, where the nub is coming out and it's in that arc, in that slot, don't put a push nut on there. It does nothing. The only reason that slot is there is to allow the louvers to close fully and give you that flat ceiling look. So there has to be a bypass built into the link bar to allow it to close. So the hole, and on the closing side of that louver is where the hole goes on. That's where the push nut goes on. Do not put the push nut on the slot side. You only have enough push nuts for one push nut per louver. If you put them on all the louvers, on all the nubs, you're quickly gonna run out of push nuts and you're gonna call me asking, hey, I need more push nuts. So please make sure one push nut per louver, it only goes on the hole. It does not go on the slot. Set the channel locks to bigger than the nub on the end cap, and then put the push nut on at a 45-degree angle, put the channel locks down onto the push nut, and then basically just lever the push nut on till it's seated and pushed all the way back to where the link bar is pressed up against the rim of the end cap nub, and the push nut is fully seated down. There's no slop on that link bar. It can't slide on the nub. After the link bar here, if you have a top trim package that you purchase from us, that's when you would install it.
An additional tool you're going to need for this is a pair of vice grips. So if you don't have some, go out and buy some before you try and install the crown. It's going to help you a bunch. So please get those. So if you're installing crown molding, you'll notice that it is the only part that you have received so far, other than the center beam, in theory, if you have one of those, that doesn't have pre-drilled holes in it. And that's because crown alignment is very difficult to get perfect if the unit isn't perfectly square. Things can change. A lot of things can change, both from an assembly installation point as well as from a manufacturing standpoint.
All right, now that we're gonna put the crown molding on, you're gonna notice the crown molding is slightly different. If you've seen our old video, the crown molding now only has one splice or one seam on each side. And that is from an aesthetic standpoint. We had some issues on the prior corner and some feedback from customers and suggestions to make it better. And so we have made it better. We've improved the design and the installation so that you have less problems and less concerns. This allows you a little bit more extra flexibility as well when you're building it. So the seam is only on the right side of the unit. So if I'm looking at the unit, the right side of every wall of crown molding will have one seam about 24 inches in from the outside of the unit. That's where that seam is. So you're gonna end up with 4 corners. The corners are now basically just one piece that has a butt joint on one side and a miter on the other side. And they're all gonna go on the right-hand side of each wall of the unit, which you can see here. So the way I would do the crown is I would do the corner on one side first, then the long piece. The corner first just allows you to align it better because you can see it and one person can watch it a lot better than when you're using the long piece, you're worried about it falling off. So if you do the corner first, then a long piece, then a corner, then the long piece, then the corner, then the long piece, then you're left with one empty wall, which is what you see here. On this empty wall, what you want to do is install the long piece first, the corner last, because the corners give you more flexibility than the long pieces do. So you want to match up that long piece first, then bring your corner up, see if you need to make any adjustments, and then make sure that you anchor that corner down last, that last corner down last. Each of these, you're going to use a splice plate in order to make sure that it looks pretty. So if you have some minor gapping, so you can have small minor differences, these splice plates allow you to compensate for all of that. It also allows you to close up every single corner to make them look nice and pretty, especially if potentially you built the unit out of square. These allow you to compensate for it.
So once you have it up in place, you're going to basically use the vice grips, clamp on to the corner. You're going to put 2 screws in it, and then you're going to move the long piece of the crown into the unit. Make sure you line up that edge and that outside face so it looks nice and pretty, and then vice grip clamp all 3 of those together. So the plate, the corner, and the long extrusion, whether it's A, B, C, or D wall, whichever one you're starting with. Clamp all this together and then put 2 screws in that. On the traditional crown, you definitely need 2 screws. On the contemporary, you can get away with 1 screw on that splice plate and it'll look fine. Definitely attach that corner with the splice plate first before pinning it down to the unit. And that's pretty much it. You'll continue doing that on all sides, and then your crown is going to look nice and pretty. If you do have an issue, please reach out to us, whether the corner isn't lining up perfectly. The one thing I will say is sometimes you'll end up with light gaps or misalignments, small misalignments. These extrusions have a lot of variation in how they come out of that mold. They can have slight angles based on how they look in planar surfaces between one another, and that's just part of the extrusion process. When you're pushing hot metal through a specific shape in 24-foot lengths, you can have slight variance, and all of that stuff, all those variances are within spec, both for us and for the extruder. So just keep that in mind. Not everything's gonna line up perfectly, but it's gonna look nice. Trust me, if it doesn't look nice, give us a call, we'll make it right. One thing you'll also notice is sometimes you'll end up with light gaps where they meet. You'll see a little bit of daylight in between. You wanna put some caulk on the back side inside the unit to try and kill that, so that way it looks dark or you can't see sunlight through them, and that will help a lot as well. The other thing you can do if you don't like seeing any silver is you can always use touch-up on the edges of each of those as you put them together. That'll also kill any light or reflection on each of those connections.
We obviously got rid of the welded crown corners, as I said, because we had a lot of feedback and a lot of suggestions from you guys on how to make it better, and that's what we did. Take the motor connection bar or assembly, raise it up in place, use the 3/8 bolts and the 3/8 lock nuts. The channel lock pliers will go on one side, your impact driver with the socket adapter and the 9/16 drive will go on the other. Tighten each of those 3 bolts till you have it rigid and fully seated on the link bar itself. Then lift the motor into place where it is positioned behind towards the non-closing side of the unit, facing towards the motor connect assembly, and then put your 10mm shoulder bolt through the motor itself. After you thread the 10mm shoulder bolt through the motor itself, put the 10mm sleeve onto that, that's the brass looking part, onto the shoulder. That's to keep the motor positioned correctly. Then thread the actual end of the shoulder bolt through the motor connection assembly, and then use the flange in bag S. All of this is in bag S on the outside of the motor connect assembly and tighten that all the way down. Once you have a tight connection there, then you're going to need to go on the back end of the motor. You're going to lift up the back end of the motor, place the motor mounting bracket underneath the motor, put the 10mm clevis pin through the motor, make sure everything's positioned correctly. You're going to put 2 number 14 screws in the back end of that motor mounting bracket. Once that's assembled, you're going to take the clevis pin back out, lift the motor up, put 2 number 14s again in the front side of that motor bracket, lower the motor again, put the 10mm clevis back in, put the cotter pin in, and then bend it with your channel lock pliers so that it is in place. It slips on this front end. You can see how it slides back on the motor there and how it basically cradles the shoulder. That's the bigger part of the motor, the part that doesn't go in and out, that bigger shoulder there. You have to push it around that. Now it might catch a little bit. You can also slide it around, but either way, you can also pry the steel apart a little bit in order to make sure that it slides on. And then all you have to do is put 4 screws in through the motor stabilizer bracket down into the top of the beam. If you have crown molding, same thing you did for your motor mounting bracket. You'll drill both through the crown molding lip itself and all the way through the beam itself to fasten it in place. Once this is in place, you're done. Those 4 screws, sliding it on, you're good. You don't have to do anything else, nothing fancy, no sealant. You're good, you're done. And then after you're totally built, just use a remote, open her up. And that should be the complete assembly of your luxury pergola. If you have any other things you're interested in or you want to purchase one, go to theluxurypergola.com. We have all different models up to a 12x20, which is what you see here. This is a bronze with stone louvers. You can configure yours. You can add top trim, a center beam, the base trim we have on that back post there, whatever you need. I'll see you in the next one. Take care.